record-breaking bestseller that is blowing up the internet, making a whole lot of people really pissed off. So we obviously have a lot to talk to him about. Please welcome James Comey. I gotta tell you, I've been listening. It's all right, y'all. He'll be here. It's all right. He's not going anywhere. It's all right.
They don't always give a standing ovation, though, when a guest comes on, and they did that with you.
But I'm really, because I'm listening to it on Audible, because it's easier for me to absorb books. And I have to say, I learned so much more about you, and it just kind of knocked me out, and it made me want to ask you, what prompted the book? Why did you decide to write it now?
Yeah, thank you for that. And thanks for having me here. This is the interview that meant the most to my wife, so thanks for, thanks for letting me on. So I'm actually a little nervous, because I don't want to screw that up. But what prompted me to write the book was a feeling that I could be useful if I shared some of the lessons I've learned through my life about what leadership should look like. And one of the things I've learned from my wife is when something bad happens, you should try to make something good come from it. Not to make it worth it, but because that's your obligation. And so I didn't love the idea of people yelling my name on the street and whatnot, but I think I had something useful to say, and I hope it's useful to people for a long time. But that's why I wrote it.
Right. Director Comey, you know, you're not naive to the criticism you've gotten from Republicans and Democrats. And I think it's worth noting that David Axelrod, a big Democrat who's a former chief strategist to President Obama, said, "I have no doubt about its brilliance when it comes to book sales. Maybe he should have called it higher royalties." What do you say to people like him and people like me that think you're just doing this for money and attention?
Yeah, first thing I do is ask him to read the book. And I'm not saying he should agree with me, but if he reads the book, he will see I'm trying to make choices between bad options and doing it in a way that I think you would want someone as director of the FBI to do it. So even if you leave the book still thinking I'm an idiot, you realize I'm actually kind of an honest idiot, and I'm not on anybody's side.
I think anyone who got to your level is an idiot. I would never accuse anyone of that. I think that maybe J. Edgar Hoover is rolling over in his grave at saying the types of things you're saying and revealing the types of things you're revealing. It doesn't seem like something that the director of the FBI... Why are you laughing?
Because J. Edgar, really, he's the wrong guy to bring up.
I wonder what dress he's wearing.
But he didn't write a tell-all when he left. So
did he say that he was a trans?
Can I finish my question? Director? So what would you say to that?
That I don't think of it as a tell-all. It's a whole lot more than the stories that are in the last few chapters of the book. It's about mistakes I've made, things I'm very much ashamed of I did when I was younger. It's a story about portions of my life to try and tell a story. It has no classified information in it, has no sensitive investigative information in it, and I know that because I wrote it and because the FBI reviewed it. Right. So I think J. Edgar Hoover would say you followed the rules and you did it. And you were transparent. I mean, if J. Edgar Hoover had a number of flaws, one of them was he wasn't a transparent person. It was all about secret files. I'm trying to tell a story that in a lot of places doesn't reflect well on me, that's open and honest.
So do you think the future of the FBI is transparency?
I think it has to be a huge part of the FBI because public confidence in the FBI is its bedrock. We have to show people our work when we can, as often as possible, so they have confidence in us.
Even if that means your second in command was fired for lying 4 times. So this is where I think the confusion comes from. Your second in command, McCabe, was fired for lying multiple times within the FBI. You defended his character on Twitter. That's okay. Lying is okay internally.
No, it's definitely not. In fact, the McCabe case illustrates what an organization that's committed to the truth looks like. We investigate and hold... I ordered that investigation. We investigate and hold people accountable. Good people lie. I lay out in the book, I think I'm a good person where I've lied. I still believe Andrew McCabe is a good person, but the Inspector General found that he lied, and there's severe consequences in the Justice Department for lying, as there should be throughout the government.
All right, let me ask you this. This morning you said you're no longer a Republican. There's a list of people like that right now, I notice. What made you say that?
I feel like the Republican Party left me and people like me. I used to think that at the heart of being a conservative, lowercase c, was first that character matters, and second, that values matter most of all. And I don't know where that is today in the Republican Party, and so I'm just not comfortable being part of it.
Which part bothers you, though? Is it the fact that they stick by Trump no matter what he does and says?
Well, it's that the sticking by reflects an abandonment of what I thought were the core principles of the Republican Party, that character matters, truth-telling matters, values matter.
Deficits matter.
Then we'll talk about policies.
Yeah.
But even policies come after values. American values are all we have as a country. So I used to think the Republican Party believed that and then said, let's make sure we fight for values, then we'll talk about policies. And it seems like they've decided that if we get these policy wins, it's okay to trade these other things for that, and that's a dangerous bargain in my view, and so I don't want to be part of it.
Okay.
Wow. Well, and I've said this on the show before, when I was at the Justice Department, and I think it continues, your character was unassailable, and I consider you a patriot.
Thank you for that.
And I think you lost your job because of it. So President Trump actually told Lester Holt that he had the Russia thing on his mind in making the decision to fire you. He recently tweeted this morning that actually the Russia thing wasn't a factor. Slippery James Comey, the worst FBI director in history, was not fired because of the phony Russia investigation.
Well, he said it.
He did say it.
We have it on tape.
Which
he changed his mind, Joy, and he
Which version do you believe? Why do you believe you were fired?
I don't know. I took him at his word when he told that to Lester Holt, and I read in the media that he also said that privately to the Russians the next day in the Oval Office. So I took him at his word. Today's tweet, which I've seen, I don't follow him on Twitter, but I've seen the tweet. Both of those things can't be true. I actually think that illustrates part of the problem that I'm trying to bring up, that it matters that the president is not committed to the truth as a Central American value. But so I don't know what to make of it.
Do you think that his base will believe him now, that he didn't mean that, or he didn't say that? I mean, he seems to say these crazy things, and then he still keeps that same base of following him and liking him. What is that?
I don't know. And look, I get and appreciate people's passion on the policy front. But what I hope people will take the time to realize is, as I said about the Republican Party, there's something that actually matters first and above that. And there's a danger. Look, when he tweets that I should be in jail, my honest reaction is a shrug, like, there's another one of those. But then I stop myself and say, wait a minute, there's danger in my shrug, because that means I'm becoming numb to the fact that the President of the United States of America is saying that a private citizen should be in jail. That's not okay. Right? That is not normal.
That's right. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, in the book, you say that Trump sought loyalty like a mafia boss. His whole platform when he ran was he was an outsider. So people like me found comfort in knowing there were career people like you around him to help, even though that might not be in your job description. So when he sought loyalty, is it possible that he didn't think that was wrong and maybe you could have said, hey, this isn't how that works?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Maybe, although I think that he had to know, because he asked me at the beginning of the dinner, and that really caught by surprise, so I just stared at him. But then, before he returned to it, much later in the dinner, I interrupted him at a couple different points to explain the importance of the distance between the institutions of justice and the president, why it matters and why it's actually in the president's interest. So I think by the time he came around to asking for it again, I'd already told him why it mattered that I was not close to him and why that would be inappropriate. Now,
would you do it differently now?
I think in fairness, that's the reason I said maybe is, if I had it to do over again, I might have said, hey, Mr. President, I'd have to interrupt because that's the way it works. Mr. President, that's not something you can do for the reasons I just explained to you. And I didn't do that, and if I had to do it over again, I'd have done it better, I think.
People like Alan Dershowitz say you didn't have the courage to, though.
Well, actually, who knows what's happening except me? And that means we'll be right back. Before we start, I just wanted to say the music's very deep.
Very Law and
It's
Order.
like dun dun dun.
Yeah, very Law and Order.
It's very Law and Order. Go ahead, son. We're back, by the way.
You know, I worked at the Justice Department as an AUSA in D.C., and the policy was, and I believe it still is that you cannot comment on an ongoing investigation. And that is because it compromises the integrity of the investigation. And while I've always been such a fan of yours, quite frankly, I was surprised that you commented on the reopening of Clinton's investigation. because really, that is against everything that I learned and that I believed in when I was at the Justice Department. I didn't understand it.
Well, you opened it, then you closed it. Then you opened it, then you closed it. Is it fair to say you suffer from premature interpretation?
You commented.
Do I have to answer that?
No. You commented on this investigation, and I'm still confused by that.
Yeah, and as are a lot of thoughtful people. You're exactly right. The Justice Department's policy is we don't comment on investigations, except if there's an overriding public interest, we need to reassure the public, or there's law enforcement activity that would otherwise be evident that we need to explain. The Hillary Clinton investigation opened in the middle of 2015. We didn't comment on it for 3 months, even though it had begun with a public referral. The whole world knew we were doing it. We applied that same policy. We decided, Loretta Lynch decided that it wasn't appropriate until the beginning of October. So that's the rule. We announced the closure of it. The problem we faced the nightmare we faced in late October was we've told the American people something that is no longer true. That justifies an exception to the normal rule, because if we don't tell them, we don't choose between speak and conceal, if we just put the pillow over our head and go back to sleep, we will have defrauded the American people. That's how I thought about it. So you're absolutely right. Extraordinary exception. I believe it's a 500-year flood. I pray no future leader of the Department of Justice has to deal with it, but that's what we faced.
But, Director, then why not tell the American people that there was an investigation going on with Russia about the very bedrock of our democracy, that the Russians were colluding, perhaps, to attack our democracy? Shouldn't have the vote, if you're going to comment on one investigation, why would you not comment on another if you're going to break that rule?
Right.
Why not break it when it's probably more important?
Yeah, another great question. I actually think our handling of the two illustrates our adherence to the rule. There are two things that were going on in the summer of 2016. One was, in late July, we opened counterintelligence investigations on a very small group of Americans, not Donald Trump, trying to understand, is there some connection between these people and the other thing that's going on in the summer of 16, which is a huge Russian effort to mess with our election.
Right.
Talking about those two things, we actually focused on what should we say about the entire Russian effort. There actually was no serious discussion about disclosing a counterintelligence investigation that had just started because we didn't know whether we had anything. We didn't want to tip off these Americans that we were looking at them. And what would we say? We've just started looking, and there may be something there, and it doesn't involve Donald Trump, and so we couldn't see. In fact, it was so obvious there wasn't an exception. We didn't debate it. What we debated and what President Obama struggled with is, should we tell the American people about the other thing, the big Russian effort?
Yes.
And I thought we should, and offered in August to be the person who did it.
Yeah.
And I wrote a draft op-ed for a major newspaper saying, the Russians are coming for our election. America needs to know about it. And they didn't take me up on the offer. They deliberated. I know why President Obama struggled. Because if you do it, have you accomplished the Russians' goal? They want to undermine confidence in our election. So if the President of the United States says the Russians are messing with us, did they just undermine confidence in our election? So I know why this was so hard for him.
But you did want to disclose it.
But we are coming back with more with James Comey.